You may be able to step in and join us. Sorry, she has been tied up with something else today, but Chief Deputy Director Amy Rising is leading this work. We have Renee Marshall with us. She's an administrator in the Professional Services Division. Do you want to say hello real quick, Renee?
Absolutely. It's so wonderful to see so many colleagues and friends on the line today. I'm just excited to be together. And I'm actually sitting in the offices at CTC right now. We just led a 2-day PK3 retreat. And so anyways, just thrilled to be here. And Cassandra, thank you for your leadership on this effort. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you. I am Cassandra Henderson, a consultant in performance assessment development, and I've been the lead consultant in developing the ECE CalFTPA, and will also be the lead consultant in developing later to come the PK3 CalTPA. Zoltan Sarda, my colleague, also a consultant in performance assessment development. He's been an integral part of this work, and he is not able to be with us today, but I want to also acknowledge him. And the wonderful June Milovich, design team content expert. June, would you like to say a quick hello?
To have everybody here. I know some of you, I've seen familiar faces that have learned about the TPA already, but I'm hoping that more of you learn about how it really can fit fairly seamlessly within your programs. And so I'm here to back up Cassandra and Lori and Mary and answer any questions.
Thank you so much. And I will turn it over to our partners, Evaluation Systems Pearson, the Senior Area Director, Mary Autry. And I will turn it over to you, Mary.
Thank you, Cassandra. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mary Autry. We are the technical contractor. I work with Evaluation Systems, technical contractor, working with the Commission on the development of assessments and examinations. I am in Roseville, California, so we are very happy to have all of you join us today. And also for my team is Lori Thornley. Lori, would you like to say hello?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lori Thornley. I'm a program manager with Evaluation Systems, part of the Sacramento-based team that will be helping to support this field test. You'll probably be talking, if you're participating in the field test, you'll be hearing from us a lot. Welcome.
Okay. And for today, I'll share some meeting norms. This webinar is recorded, and that recording will be shared on a private YouTube link after this meeting, probably within the next day or two. We'll do a brief review of the ECE CalFTPA development, and we will review the structure and format of the ECE CalFTPA. We will talk a little bit about essential questions and rubrics, and then we will talk about, I will turn it over to our friends at ES Pearson, and they will talk about the field test participation, assessor information, and we will talk about available supports for programs. So this webinar is recorded. Access will be through a private YouTube link that we will provide to everyone who's here. And the recording link and slides will be provided also in a follow-up email from Evaluation Systems. Online norms. Please unmute yourself when you would like to comment or ask a question. You may also feel free to type questions in the chat, and we will try to respond as we go through this webinar today. There are some times built in within our slide deck here where you can ask questions as well. Please keep your questions to a general focus rather than program or candidate student-specific inquiries. And please avoid multitasking during this webinar so you don't miss anything. We'd like to honor time for both participants and presenters by moderating questions and comments. And please remember that Zoom fatigue is real. Please give your eyes a break from time to time. So the Early Childhood Education CalFTPA, and the CalFTPA stands for California Formative Teaching Performance Assessment Development. We'll just take a brief walk through how do we get here. Okay, so between January and February of 2021, the ECE design team was appointed by our CTC executive director, Mary Vixie Sandy. And from March to November, the ECE design team, the CTC, and our technical contractors, Evaluation Systems Pearson, worked on developing cycles and rubrics that are based on the early childhood TPEs, the teaching performance expectations, and measure what a candidate should know and be able to demonstrate. From December 2021 through February 2022, we provided support to pilot study programs and candidates. And from March to May, we conducted our pilot study and consensus scoring. We then took the information we gathered from that pilot study and consensus scoring, from focus groups, from surveys that the teaching permit candidates took, that the faculty who participated took those surveys, and also some mentor and supervising teachers took. We took all of that feedback. We also worked with our design team, and we gathered what things needed to be edited, adjusted, changed. And we changed rubrics. We adjusted the mapping to the TPEs. We adjusted some of the wording and did a little wordsmithing on the prompts and some of the steps within the cycle guides, which we will show you in a little bit. And so we've made changes for this field test. So from May through December, end of this year, we're preparing for the field test, and we've been revising those pilot study materials, as I just mentioned. This January through the end of April is really our kickoff to the field test and our conducting of the field test. And then this summer, we will complete the final revisions to the cycles and rubrics. Again, there will be focus groups and surveys and consensus scoring, and we will take all of the feedback from that information and revise what we use in the field test for the final revisions to the program guides and the cycle guides. And we will provide a training for trainers and for assessors of the ECE CalFTPA. This assessment will not be centrally scored as the other TPAs and APA are with CTC. This one will be locally scored. So we will be training faculty in how to score these using the analytic 3-point rubrics. And then they will also be able to train their own colleagues at their site. Fall of 2023, programs will begin to implement the ECE CalFTPA, and the training of trainers for assessors will continue. So what does the ECE CalFTPA measure? It measures the teacher permit teaching performance expectations, or TPEs. And the TPEs are what an early childhood education teacher seeking a permit needs to know and be able to demonstrate, and they will focus on children ages 3 to 5 years. The ECE teacher TPEs were developed and adopted in 2019. So what are the benefits of participating in the field test? Well, there are a lot of them. The ECE CalFTPA can be substituted in a course for a signature assignment or assessment. Your program will receive aggregated data that could be utilized in your program review and might be useful as you pursue funding opportunities. Aggregated data will support faculty data analysis, comparing programs and students to regional and statewide data. And a TPA will be required for the PK3 credential, which is still in development. Early childhood education students who are familiar with formative assessment cycles and rubrics have the opportunity to informally experience a performance assessment before they take the PK3 ECE TPA, which is still to be developed, and that work has not begun yet. So there are definitely some benefits. There are 3 ECE CalFTPA cycles. Cycle 1 is observing young children. Cycle 2 is planning learning activities. Cycle 3 is building family partnerships. And we will delve into these a bit so you can see the steps within each of these. So cycle 1, observing young children. Okay. This cycle begins with the first step, which is to plan. And here the candidate will gather contextual information for the group of children, and they'll select one focus child. That focus child may be a child who is has a different primary language than English. That focus child could be a child who has some specific special needs or has an IEP, that child could be a child who gathers your curiosity. You're curious about this child. It's the child that you go home still thinking about. And that could be for a variety of reasons, but the candidate will choose a child that fits one of those three profiles. Then the candidate will prepare to observe and record. So they will conduct one observation for the focus child. And there is a prepared template that will be available when the field test begins. That observation template has 3 sections: social emotional, interactions the child has with other children, adults, and the environment, and engagement with learning. And so the candidate will complete the sections for those and taking in information about what they see and hear the child doing. The candidate will then analyze that observed data and provide some interpretations. They will then meet with their supervising mentor teacher to check their interpretation, so to mitigate bias. And then they will check with at least 2 other sources to align their data with other types of assessment information. Is it an intake form? Is it information from their supervising mentor teacher? So they will check their interpretations with other sources, as well as that conversation with the supervising mentor teacher. And then they will conduct a second observation for the focus child in a different activity. Step 3 is to reflect. The candidate will reflect on what they learned through their observations of the child, their conversations with the supervising mentor teacher, and their additional information and assessments that they used. And step 4, apply. The candidate will describe how they will apply what they learned and how it will advance their teaching practice. And they will describe the next content-based development learning opportunities or experiences for the child. And we're going to actually go to the guide so I can show you some key features within the guide. This is Learning Cycle 1, Observing Young Children. This is the first guide. There is a cycle guide, learning cycle guide for each cycle. And we'll just kind of scroll down to the beginning. There is an overview within each of the cycle guides. Okay. This overview gives the candidate information on what the learning cycle focuses on. This one's on observing young children and why it's important. And if we keep scrolling down here, there's a lot of helpful information in here that helps the candidate to focus on what they need to know. For example, you'll see this lavender colored box. We call that a call-out box. This one focuses on social and emotional development. So there's some information there, and that call-out box just says, hey, look, this is important. And it gives them a chance to focus on some information there. There is also this helpful tool. This is a diagram that illustrates the process the candidate's going to complete within the cycle. And it tells them step by step what they're going to be doing. There is another section in the guide called the evidence table that will also tell the candidate what they're going to be doing. Now you see another call out box as we keep scrolling. And here are, before we get to the evidence table, here are the preschool learning foundations and curriculum frameworks. Everywhere that you see a blue hyperlink, the candidate can click on that hyperlink and be taken directly to that document. So if they click there, they can go right to the different volumes of the preschool learning foundations. And then if we scroll down a little bit more, there's the transitional kindergarten implementation guide and standards and the state adopted kindergarten student standards. And all of those are there because the candidate is focusing on children ages 3 to 5. Okay, here is the evidence table. This is another view, a little bit different than the flow chart, for the candidate to see. On the far left, it notes the cycle step. In the middle, it notes what they need to do, just in a bulleted quick form. And on the far right, it tells them what are they going to submit, what evidence will they submit for that step. So if we look at the first one here, on the far left, it says step 1 plan. And it tells them in the middle there that they're going to gather some contextual information. They're going to choose a focus child. And on the far right, it tells them these are the templates. This one is part A getting to know the children in focus child that they will complete. It tells them a page limit if there is one, and they'll know that that's what they will submit for that first step. And it does that for each of the steps, as you can see if you look down the left side of this table. If we keep scrolling down, that's just a bulleted form of what they will be doing, but you'll notice here it says step 1 plan. Now we get into a much more detailed description of directions and also the prompts, the questions that the candidate will respond to on those templates. Okay. Won't read them all, but just to give you a view right here, here are some of the things that they will be responding, the candidate will respond to about the group of children and the learning environment, just as an example. Okay, and those are the prompts that will be on the template. Okay, you can keep scrolling. And there is a detailed, this detailed information is for each of the 4 steps within each cycle. So we will scroll through that and we will go down to what we call the essential questions. These learning cycles, the candidate is scored, their responses are scored and their performance is scored based on rubrics, 3-point rubrics. So we're going to scroll down to the essential questions. So you can see what that table looks like. Each of the rubrics has an essential question. And so here is a table of all the essential questions. Following this section would be all of the rubrics, but I will show you a rubric in our slide deck in just a bit. So we will, I'll show you these essential questions for now. This particular cycle has 5 rubrics. You see step 1 plan, there's 1 rubric, rubric 1.1. Step 2 has 1 rubric. Step 3 has 2 rubrics. And step 4 has 1 rubric. So there are 5 rubrics in learning cycle 1. And each of these essential questions that you see here lines up with one of the rubrics. And you can see, are you able to move your cursor over near that essential question or highlight it, Lori? So the essential question that was above, that was noted next to 1.1, is right here with this first rubric. Okay. And with that, we can stop and go back to the slides, please. Okay. Before we talk about cycle 2, are there any questions? You can either type in the chat or raise a hand on cycle 1 so far. June, would you mind checking the chat for me, please, in case something pops up?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. Nothing's there so far.
Okay, perfect. Okay, then we will keep going. There is an opportunity for you to ask questions later as well. We'll take a look at cycle 2. Cycle 2 focuses on planning learning activities. And in cycle 2, the first step is observe and plan. This cycle is the only cycle that requires video recording of the children in an activity. And the first step, step 1 for this cycle, is observe and plan. In this cycle, the candidate will gather contextual information for the group of children, and they will choose 3 focus children in this cycle. 1 child will be a child who is learning English. 1 child will be a child who has an IEP or has some potentially identifiable need. And then the 3rd child will be a child, again, that sparks their curiosity. They will develop 1 math or literacy activity, and they will provide some key resources and materials that they will utilize during that activity. Step 2 is teach and assess. The candidate will video record, excuse me, the entire activity, and they will create actually 4 up to 5-minute video clips. And they will, those clips need to demonstrate the following things: creating a positive and safe learning environment for children, engaging children in active learning, establishing expectations for learning, and checking for understanding. And the candidate will annotate their video clips to explain where they have demonstrated each of those 4 pedagogical skills. Step 3 is reflect, and here the candidate will reflect on their planning and teaching, what worked well, what did not. And apply, step 4. The candidate will explain how they could use what they learned through completing this cycle and to demonstrate their rationale for the next activity for the children. And they will explain what the next steps are to take with connecting with families and guardians about the children's experiences with the activity. And we will go to the guide so you can get an idea of this one. We will, so this is cycle 2, learning cycle 2, planning learning activities. And much like cycle 1, this learning cycle has an overview that explains to the candidate what this learning cycle focuses on and why it's important. So we'll continue scrolling past that. You'll see another call out box and you see the flow chart again. The same preschool learning foundations and curriculum frameworks are listed, and they're hyperlinked in each of the cycle guides. And we'll show you the evidence table. And maybe we'll take a look at step 2 this time. Step 2 here in this learning cycle is teach and assess. And here the candidate will teach the planned mathematics or literacy activity that they have designed. They will video record the entire activity, including the teacher, the children, and any support personnel. They will then create 4 video clips of up to 5 minutes each that demonstrate the 4 pedagogical areas: creating a positive and safe learning environment, engaging children in active learning, establishing expectations for learning, and checking for understanding. And then they will write annotations. On the far right in this table, you see that they will submit parts E, which are the 4 video clips of the activity, up to 5 minutes each, and then part F, the written annotations about those video clips. And we will continue forward. Again, you see step 1 here, and it notes the title of each step, and it gives more detailed instructions and directions, and also the prompts are within this section for each of the steps. So the candidate knows exactly what to do. And we'll keep scrolling to essential questions, please.
Cassandra, we have a question in the chat. It says, is this activity expected to be a small group experience, or could it be a free play experience that the student has planned?
It could be a small group experience. It would need to be math or literacy based for this cycle. So that's what this particular activity would need to be, math or literacy based. Here are the essential questions for this cycle. Lori, would you mind scrolling down just a little bit more, please? There we go. This particular cycle, if the free play is math or literacy based, Rachel, that would be fine. This particular cycle has 6 rubrics, and the essential questions are here. Again, we're going to see a rubric in just a bit, but and just below this are the actual rubrics, and the essential question is listed above, as Lori demonstrated in the first cycle guide. So I think, Lori, we can go back to our slides, please. Are there any other questions about learning cycle 2? Oh, I see. Is there something else in the chat? Oh, or was that the question? Or we just, okay, that was the question we just.
That was just a follow-up to the question.
Perfect. Learning cycle 3, building family guardian partnerships. And again, we have 4 steps. The first step here is observe and plan. In this cycle, the candidate is going to observe the children, and the candidate has an opportunity, the opportunity in this cycle to either teach a lesson with their supervising mentor teacher or observe a lesson with their supervising mentor teacher and the focus child. They will choose one focus child this time, and they will observe that activity or co-teach it. And they will take some information in, observe what they can gather about the child and how they interacted. And then in step 2, oh, there it is. So they will describe that activity. They'll describe that in-school activity. And then they will connect with the child's family guardians to describe that activity, how the child did with that activity, what happened. This will also be math or literacy based and the opposite of whatever cycle 2 is. So if cycle 2 was math, this one would be literacy or vice versa. They will observe and or co-teach that in-school activity, as I noted before, and they will describe what happened, and then they will outline what is important for the focused child's family guardians to know about their child's learning. In step 2, design and connect, they will design an at-home activity for that one focused child and their family guardians based on what happened in the in-school activity. They will plan strategies with support from the supervising mentor teacher to connect with the focused child's family guardians to explain the goals of the at-home activity. And they will connect with the focused child's family guardians to discuss and explain that activity and goals and hear what goals that family guardians has for their child. They will also reconnect with the family to discuss what happened when they engaged in the at-home activity with their child. In step 3, reflect, the candidate will explain how that at-home activity was experienced by the child and the family guardians, and they'll reflect on and describe the connections with them and how that worked, what worked well, what didn't. In step 4, apply, they will explain how they can revise that at-home activity to either extend or better support the child's learning. And they will describe how they will apply what they have learned about connecting with a family guardian. Okay, and we will take a look at learning cycle 3. Here's learning cycle 3, building family guardian partnerships. And just like cycles, learning cycles 1 and 2, there's an overview, tells the candidate what this cycle is focusing on, why it's important. Again, you see that flow chart telling the candidate what steps they're going to complete. There's a call out box again that tells them to kind of stop, look and, pay attention to that. And again, here are the preschool learning foundations and curriculum frameworks. Again, they're hyperlinked. Here's the evidence table. We'll take a look maybe at step 3 this time. Okay, so on the far left, step 3, reflect. And the candidate here will reflect on how that out of school activity was experienced by the child and the family guardians. And they will reflect on and describe their connections with the family guardians. And the piece of evidence they will submit here on the far right is part F, as in Frank, written narrative, reflection on what you've learned. Okay, we'll scroll down a bit. Again, here are the steps spelled out with much deeper directions, and the prompts are listed out that the candidate will respond to in those templates. And we'll take a look at the evidence table. And just a little, there we go, a little bit down. This particular learning cycle has 8 rubrics, 3.1 to 3.8. Step 1, observe and plan, has 2 rubrics. Step 2, as you can see, has rubric 3.3 through 3.5. So there are 3 rubrics there, 1 rubric in step 3 and 2 in step 4. And again, we'll show you a rubric in just a bit. And we can we are looking at the essential questions. So we can actually go back to the slides, please, Lori.
Do you want to take a look at a template? The next
Yes, that
slide
would
is
be great.
the next slide is questions. Yeah.
Sure, that would be great.
All right. So as you've gathered, having seen us walk through the 3 cycles, the cycles are comprised of a multi-page handbook, 20, 30 page handbook with step-by-step directions for the candidate. They're redundant by design. They provide overviews of the information, short snapshot views, the evidence charts, but then later in the guides, you get into more detailed directions and descriptions and explanations of what the candidates need to do and the evidence that they need to gather. Corresponding with these handbooks are standalone templates, which are actually Word documents. Here's an example. This one is from the pilot. We are actually in the middle of developing the handbooks and the templates for the field test, so they're not quite done yet. So we're showing you a sample from the pilot, but basically it's just a Word document. This one happens to be the template for step 1 plan part A of cycle 1. And essentially it reiterates all of the prompts in the handbook guide, each of the prompts, and then there is a space between bracketed space after each prompt, and that's where the candidate will actually type their responses. So they'll download these templates to their own computers, prepare their responses to all of these prompts, and then it is actually these Word document templates that they will be submitting as evidence for their cycles.
Mhm. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, next slide, please. Are there any, that was a lot. So are there any questions about the learning cycles?
I do believe, Cassandra, we do anticipate having advanced drafts. We don't have them yet. Like I said, these are still going through bias reviews and copy edits. But we do anticipate having advanced draft copies available for the programs that decide to participate in the field test. So you'll be able to get your hands on an actual handbook.
Yes. There will also be, I'll add this in here because it is still in development, so I do not have it to show you today. There will also be a faculty guide. In addition to a cycle guide for each of the learning cycles, there will be a faculty guide. That particular guide is faculty facing rather than teaching permit candidate facing. And it gives faculty information on what the candidate will be doing, how to best support them. And that particular guide could also be shared with, let's say, a practicum instructor who's working with the candidates directly in the learning space.
Cassandra, we have one question in the chat. Do we have to choose one or all cycles or more than one, or how?
I would love it if you would choose to try out all of them. This is something that gives you a chance and your candidates a chance to just try it out, see how it works for you, see what it feels like for your candidates, see what it feels like to participate. So you may try one or all or two, but it would be wonderful if you try all, get a feel for each of them, because each of those learning cycles, as you can see from the focus, they're all a little bit different. The format is similar and there are things that repeat within them, but what they're focusing on, the candidate, is different in each cycle. Good question. Anything else in the chat, June?
Nothing else in the chat, but I have a little quick follow-up related question to that. If a faculty decided to do all 3 cycles, and including cycle 2, which requires video, but not 100% of their practicum students were placed where video was feasible, but maybe some of them were. Is it okay to complete cycle 2 with just some of the students in your class, the ones where that is going to be workable for them?
That is fabulous, and that's a perfect solution. I think the best thing is to give, as many candidates as you can a chance to try these cycles. So if you have some that can do cycle 2 because of permissions at whatever their placement site is, that's great. If all of them can't do that, they could try cycle 1 or 3 or both. So yes, and the cycles are designed to take about 2 to 4 weeks each to complete. When will the materials be available? My semester. Okay, so someone is saying their semester starts January 17th and you would need the information. So in January, the date is to be determined. We will have another kickoff. By that time, yes, we should have materials. Is that correct, Lori? We would have them by then, right? Mid-January or just before mid-January?
Sorry, I was on mute. I think we just determined that we were going to hold the kick, and we'll talk, we've got a timeline slide a little bit later. We just determined we're going to hold the kickoff for the pilot on February 2nd. But I think, Cassandra, I think we should be able to get draft versions of the guides out in programs' hands in January.
And if I need to do a kickoff before February 2nd, I can do that. I'd be happy to do that.
The actual the actual field test will launch on, and by field test launching, we're talking about the physical website and submission systems. Those will launch on February 7th and remain open for 8 weeks. And again, we've got a timeline slide. We'll talk about that a little bit later.
This is Lisa Fuller, and I was just going to follow up. I had the question about the January 17th. So the issue that I had trying to do the pilot this last year was that I didn't get the information until March, which means I had to do it all as extra credit assignments, which means I had one student actually complete everything for cycle 3, which was what I was a part of. In order for me to have it in my class and have students actually complete it as assignments, I have to build it into my class before the semester starts so that it's actually reflected in all of my assignments. So is there any way to get these guides and the faculty guide and all of that stuff to us like in December so that we can build it into our classes so that it's ready to go when the semester starts as part of our contract with our students?
The faculty guide is not fully prepared yet. It's still in process. I can check with Amy, and we can talk with ES and see what is doable, but these are still being developed and being finalized. So we can try, but I don't have that final answer for you yet, Lisa.
Okay, it's just going to make it more difficult to get students to participate if they aren't required to do it. Because if I get it after the start of the semester, I can't update and change my syllabus. I have to have everything laid out ahead of time.
No, that makes sense. I understand. So I can tell you that I will definitely bring that up and see what we can do, but they are in development.
So Cassandra, last spring, you guys were able to give us the draft prior to, and that was very helpful. So I didn't know if that could be an option, just give it to us in draft form so we can at least set up our classes and at least look like we know how we're going to approach this in our classrooms to our students.
Yeah, Cassandra, I'm pretty sure we can get advanced drafts out. I just don't know if that will be before the holiday or if it would be immediately after the holiday. So like early January. That's what I can't answer at this point.
Because I could see doing all 3 cycles could be very, very difficult if you don't have the information. So that's why I chose last spring to just do cycle 3, because I figured, well, at least if I get the information, I can get it in there. But to do all 3, it might be difficult. And I've signed up to do all 3. So that would be really great if we could get at least a draft form.
Sure. No, it's a good suggestion. And I hear your concern and Lisa's. And so we will do what we can to do that. But again, Lori shared the concern that it may or may not be just before Christmas.
Yeah, we'll do our best to get it out as soon as we can.
I see Rachel's hand is up, and I didn't yet.
Rachel, before Rachel's went up, there was one question in the chat about if some of the information is repeated from cycle to cycle. For example, the observation from cycle 1 and moving to cycle 2, can the candidates use that information?
If they were with the same children, they probably could, but the cycles have changed a bit from the pilot. When we were going into the pilot, that was really feasible because in each of the cycles when we were in pilot phase, they chose 3 focused students for each of the learning cycles. And as you can see, that's changed a bit. So for cycle 1, they're choosing 1 focused child. In cycle 2, now they are choosing 3. And in cycle 3, they're choosing 1. So there could be a placement, I would assume. There were a candidate might be with the same children, and that may work, but it would depend, so that will just depend on that candidate situation and which children they're with. So it could work, but it may not work for everyone. And is Rachel next?
Now Rachel, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. I was just going to say my school starts on January 9th. So as soon as possible, that'd be helpful. But I was wondering if it would, as a faculty, I know that that faculty guide will be useful, but if we could at least just get a sense of, like, in thinking about assignments, having having a student guide, at least for that part, I think would be the most critical to at least get our assignments up and running, and then we can build more information into it. But it would help me at least get a perspective of what I should be putting into my assignments to having the students complete these things, how we're going to do it. And the other side to this, and I know you've mentioned it a little bit, but I am concerned about and I mentioned this in the pilot as well, I am concerned about the privacy of those videos, because those videos are things that our college has always controlled. We've never let the students control it. And so I'm going to have to work through all of my confidentiality statements and things like that again, to be able to figure out how to provide that for this pilot. So again, I'm going to second what everybody else is saying, and as whatever information we can get, the sooner the better, so I cannot have to spend my first week of school trying to revise and do everything.
Sure. And again, we will work as fast as we can to get drafts to you. As far as the video recording, there are some programs that were able to do that and some that were not. So those are individual requirements within the institution. For programs that can video record the lesson, the candidate is still being guided by their supervising mentor teacher to get permission from parents. They're not recording any children doing anything without parent permission, and any other permissions that their institution requires. So that is a factor. And then those recordings for this field test, when they're uploaded, those are strictly there. They're not distributed anywhere else. They're not distributed in social media. So that is how the recording works. Video recording is required in our design, how we are required to design performance assessments. So all of the performance assessments have a video requirement. Renee, I see your hand up. Did you want to?
I just wanted to mention that confidentiality piece, Rachel, that you had brought to my attention before. I brought that up to Mary Sandy, and I said, you know, I know this is a concern in the field, specifically at one site, but I know it's much larger than just this one site. And I talked about the, you know, just within early childhood education and what our normal protocol is when recording in the classroom and what that looks like. And Mary had a great suggestion. She said, well, I know some of the group did it, so let's figure out the ones that did it. How were they able to do it respectfully and to keep that confidentiality and whatnot? And so, Cassandra, I don't know within this webinar if we have time with that to get into that, but at a later time, if maybe we can explore that whole piece of how do we keep the confidentiality at the same and keep what the tenets that we hold dear, but at the same time be able to participate and, you know, help to move everything forward. And so if we can have some time at a later moment to kind of dig into that together, I think that would be great. And it was great. I thought it was a great suggestion that Mary gave. It's like, oh, wait a second, let's see those who did, let's see what they did. Maybe there's some great tips and strategies and whatnot that we can kind of consider promising practices in this space. And then moving forward, people can adopt what, you know, fits within parameters, but also fits within their culture of their school and their even belief system in terms of early childhood education.
Sure. And I think when we get to the kickoff, Renee, we will definitely delve more deeply into the cycle 2 video recording. And
Fantastic.
again, I'm happy to do a kickoff in January as well as February. I'm happy to do both.
Thank you.
Anything else in the chat? I'm sorry, I can't see if someone can check.
There is, oh, sorry, Jean, I didn't mean to speak there.
No, that's okay. There's actually a few questions. One is about the ages of children. Actually, let me hop up to one before that. Someone asked if at a CSU with a lab school, is it possible to have the center staff from the lab complete the pilot instead of the students and then implement it with students in the future?
It is, the assessment is actually designed for beginning ECE teacher permit level, those who are seeking that teacher permit level and they're beginning teachers. So it would really be best to have beginning teachers and see what they can demonstrate and where there are issues with how it's written and where there aren't, because that's what a field test allows us to do, test this out and see what we need to change. It would be a very different result if seasoned teachers are taking this assessment.
Thank you. And we have for cycle 2, if a student's working with a supervising teacher who does not have a child with an IEP or multi-language learner, is it still feasible to be able to find 3 focused children?
Absolutely. So let's suppose there are not any dual language learners in that classroom. They can choose another. All of us are learning English, so they can choose another child. Maybe it's a child who needs some support in communicating clearly, or a child who is learning how to communicate with other children. They could choose a child like that as well. Or what was the other one? A child that does not have an IEP. Is that what you said?
Yeah, IEP or multilingual.
Okay, sure. There could also be a child who maybe needs some extra support in learning, or a child who seems to maybe they need more challenging material in the classroom. So that would work as well. Sure, absolutely.
Right. And there was a question about using 3 to 5 year olds in their area. They have a larger number of 2-year-olds.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This came up in the pilot as well, and even our design team was asking about it, because obviously the preschool experience goes beyond 3 to 5 year olds. But for this assessment, we do focus on 3 to 5 year olds. That is who it's designed for. It really isn't designed for 2-year-olds or 1-year-olds, and certainly not for infants. So they would need to focus on children ages 3 to 5, and that could be a child who's newly turned 3. Or, of course, a child who's a little bit older, all the way up to 5 years. That could also include a child who's 5 and maybe close to turning 6, depending on the situation. So those are the ages that they would need to focus on for this assessment. And that's really who it's best designed for.
Right. And another question about the field test does need to be completed in the spring of 23, correct?
Yes, there is when I say January, that's our kickoff. Sorry. Something's in my throat today. That's the kickoff. But the actual window from when your teaching permit candidates can begin to submit what is the window? Lori, it's March, right? February through April?
The system will go online on February 7th and remain open and accepting submissions all the way through April 7th.
Mm-hmm. And there is a cutoff, because we have to then take those in and get them scored so that we can get a sense of what worked, what didn't. We then plan focus groups, and we send out surveys, and we then aggregate that data. So there is an end time to when they can submit, and there's a beginning time. So yes, it would have to be taken within that window. I know for the pilot, we did extend, though. We had some people who needed extra time, and we were able to extend it a bit, so we did. But at this time, it would end in the time frame that Lori just mentioned.
And that could be whether they do 1 or 2 of them, or all.
Right. Or all, yes.
And someone also asked if there's a way to collect sample confidentiality statements across. And I believe I just saw an email coming out from OER, perhaps with Jennifer Pearson, we can follow up, that was actually putting out a request for colleges' confidentiality agreements. And we can certainly follow up on that.
Absolutely. And then maybe what we could do, if you're able to give us a little time to follow up, maybe we could be able to even have something where you could click a link and maybe look at some of those or access them by the time we get to January. And you would be able to, click on a link and use them. So if you give us a bit of time to collect, we're happy to be of service that way.
Yeah, I created audio, video, media agreement with families for cycle 3, and I created a flyer that talked about what cycle 3 was all about. And also most of us that teach teaching practicum, we do confidentiality agreements and media agreements with all of our families, because we're at a lab school. So we make sure that parents know what we videotape is secure. And I felt very confident with the Pearson website. The students felt very confident with the Pearson website. So it felt like, and we give our students tablets to use to do the videos in the classrooms. I think it is manageable. You just have to make sure the students understand their responsibility with confidentiality, because they all have cell phones. And they all and you're not over out there hovering over every single 35 students each semester. So so I'd be happy to share any of those resources that I provided my students with here at Shasta.
Oh, thank you. Jeannie, would you mind emailing them to me? Do you have my email?
I do.
Okay,
Yeah,
if you would mind emailing, and I'll just put this out. If anyone else here also has something like that to share, if you would please email that to me, then we can kind of put that together so that everyone can take a look and have that as a resource. I would really appreciate that. Would someone mind putting my email in the chat for me in case someone doesn't have it, please?
I'll do it.
Thank you. Well, let me click on the chat too. Did we miss anything? I think there's a question.
There was one question about
okay, so this question pertains to the field test end time. It would end April 7th. Could it go later than April? I need to probably have a chance to talk with Evaluation Systems Pearson and figure out how that works, because we are honestly on a tight timeline to get this information back, score, do all of that, and then, get our training of trainers model going and all of those things. So I will certainly share the concern, but I'm not certain that that is or isn't possible yet. So if you can stay tuned, I can let you know more as we go forward. And there's my email in the chat. Thank you, June. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to move us forward at this time because our partners at Evaluation Systems Pearson have some information to share with you. And actually, let me share the rubrics first, and then we'll go to that. So I'm going to show you one of the rubrics. This happens to be 1.5, and this was step 4, apply. And there is an essential question listed at the top. Here's the arrow. And this one just says, how does a candidate apply? Citing evidence from steps 1, 2, and/or 3. There are interpretations of the observation notes to suggest universal design for learning and culturally and linguistically responsive learning activities appropriate to the focused child's development level. Below that, you see the 3 levels of the rubric. We'll get into that further as well in a moment. And then down here at the bottom where you see the next arrow, source of evidence. So when scoring this particular step 4, the scorer, the assessor, is going to look at part E only. You'll see one thing is listed there. Some of the rubrics have more than one template listed there. Some have several, but for this one, they're going to look at part E, which is the narrative application of what you learned. And you'll see a page limit there for the candidate. Step 4, apply, has a neat option for candidates in all of the cycles, and that is they may complete the written template for step 4, apply, or they can provide a 5-minute video of just themselves, no children, explaining their answers to the prompts for step 4. And I have looked at submissions that have the written and application, and I've looked at submissions that have the video. One is not necessarily scored higher than another, but it is really compelling to see the video and hear them explain in that video clip. So there's that. And then below that, as you see the 3rd arrow there, here are the TPEs and the TPE elements that are addressed within the rubric, okay, for that step. Okay. Now, there are 3 levels to this rubric, level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 2 is the expected performance for a beginning teacher seeking the permit. Level 2. So in this level, you'll see how it's broken up almost to look like little paragraphs. And so the first one is, here we go, that's a construct. And for this one, the first construct is that the candidate's UDL and culturally and linguistically responsive activity suggestions for this focused child are clear and appropriately aligned with the interpretations of the observation data. That's construct 1. So the assessor is going to look for evidence, 1 piece of evidence minimum for each of these constructs. Okay. If there is evidence for this construct, then they go to the second construct where you see the 2nd arrow. Candidates' activity suggestions for the focused child are appropriate to their development level. They're going to look for evidence of that in what the candidate submitted. And then there is construct 3. In this case, it is that the candidate cites evidence from their steps 1, 2, and or 3. Pay close attention to and or. So those are the 3 constructs within that level 2. If, can we go back one slide, Lori, please? Just, oh, sorry, the arrows have to go away first. Okay, so if evidence was missing for one of those constructs in level 2, then the assessor would move down to a level 1. If all of if evidence was available for each of those constructs in level 2, the assessor would move up to level 3. And at the top of level 3, it actually says all of level 2 plus, and then there are 2 more constructs in this case, in this rubric for level 3. And they would need to have evidence for both of those constructs to receive a score of 3. Okay. Thank you, Lori. Any questions about the rubric before we move forward from here? Again, that was just one rubric example, but they are constructed the same. Okay, I don't see any hands up or anything. Okay, so we will move forward. And I'll turn it over to Evaluation Systems Pearson.
Thank you, Cassandra. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, we do have a high-level timeline here for the field test. We are conducting today's informational webinar. There's another webinar scheduled next Wednesday, I believe, June, for practicum instructors. But of course, anybody who wanted to attend, I'm sure, is welcome to attend. And it'll be very similar to today's webinar.
Oh, real quick, Lori, one thing. That webinar next on the 7th, that is also on Eventbrite. And it's free, but a person can register on Eventbrite and get the link just like for today. And yes, it's open. There will be no issues with anyone being able to register.
So I just tried to register for that today and it wasn't open. It says that registration opens December 7th at noon.
Okay, I will fix that. Thank you, Lisa.
All right, you'll notice the next deadline on this timeline is December 9th, initial program application deadline. That is by no means a final deadline. We're just encouraging and we're hoping that the majority of the programs that are interested in participating will complete the application, and we have the link for the application in a few slides, in a few later slides. But complete the application for the pilot by December 9th, because we are planning to send out an initial program instruction or confirmation letter on December 16th to try to get that information out into participating programs' hands before the holidays. So that's the goal there. Certainly, if you are on the fence, if you haven't decided if you're going to participate yet or not, you decide later on and later on in December or even in January that you would like to participate, by all means, you are more than welcome to join us. But if you can make a decision by December 9th, we would greatly appreciate it. All right, you'll see down on the next deadline on the timeline is January 20th. That is when candidate lists will be due. We are at, and that instructions for providing your list will be in that confirmation communication sent on December 16th. The reason for requiring candidate lists is we use that information to create vouchers, which are basically an alphanumeric code, kind of like what are they called? A promotional code on an Amazon shopping site. They're like a promotional code that they'll use when they register to bypass the registration fee system, because obviously we're not going to charge candidates for participating in the pilot. So it's that voucher code that will allow them to register and participate for free. And so we'll need your lists of candidates so we can prepare the voucher codes to provide to you. The next date you see is February 2nd. That is when we are planning a kickoff webinar. By that time, the website and the submission system should be available for us to give you not a hands-on, but a eyes-on demo and walk you through the actual submission system and show you step by step how it works so that you will be able to assist your candidates should they have questions about the systems and the process. The systems themselves will actually go live on February 7th. We are planning to have another midpoint webinar for participating programs midway through the pilot. That's on March 8th. That's just an opportunity to check in, see how things are going. Certainly we will be available, all of us, Cassandra, myself, my colleagues at ES will all be available to answer questions, daily. Should you need our assistance, but know that there'll be a planned midpoint webinar. There, again, the next deadline is April 7th. That is the submission deadline. It will take us probably the majority of the month of April to, oh, no, I'm missing something here. In April, oh, I have the participant list and the chat windows open on top of my slide, so I can't see the far end of the timeline. We do plan a series of focus groups and surveys, and we will be asking all programs, the program contact, as well as any faculty and candidates who participate in the field test to participate in a couple of focus groups and some surveys to help us collect feedback from everyone who participates in the field test. So those will happen in April. Also happening in April and May will be the scoring of the assessment. And then in June, programs that participate can expect to receive aggregated results back from the field test. Any questions about the timeline? And again, we will figure out when the absolute earliest we can possibly get draft handbooks, guides in everyone's hands. We will do our best to get those out as early as possible prior to the kickoff on February 2nd. Certainly by early January, if not before the holidays.
Lori, this isn't about the timeline, but I didn't want it to get lost. But one of the participants is asking, is this like the other field tests where students who participate and pass don't need to take it again? And I think that means TPA, where students who participate and pass don't need to take it again. Cassandra, that might be a question.
This is different in that the ECE CalFTPA is not required for the permit. It is optional for programs and candidates. So in the other TPAs, a TPA is required for the credential. So if they participated in the field test and did that, they would not need to do that again. That is different for the ECE CalFTPA.
So in other words, this assessment that we are building, Cassandra, I'm sort of taking a further step from that. Once this has been finalized, it will be handed off to programs to implement locally. There won't be a passing standard for candidates to meet, and there won't be a requirement for them to pass it to receive their permit, teaching permit.
That is correct. That's correct.
This is specifically for the teacher level permit candidate.
I see something about a list of candidates coming later, and if that's fine, Caroline. That's fine.
Yes, we can certainly take candidate lists after the 20th. Certainly February 6th is fine. It just means it might take us a few days to get the vouchers prepared for you. So we might not have them available exactly on February 7th if we don't get them until the 6th. That's not a problem. Your candidates can certainly start working on the materials. They just won't be able to register in the system until we're able to get them their vouchers.
I see a couple of questions about the PK3 credential, which is different from this ECE CalFTPA. This is the formative assessment, which will be locally scored for folks seeking the ECE teacher level permit. The PK3 credential will have a TPA, yes, but that is not developed yet. We have not begun development on that yet. So that will come down the road. So while a candidate can gain really great experience with taking this ECE CalFTPA to learn what that is like and how that works, and you know, if they're interested in getting the PK3 credential later, they would already have some familiarity with a teaching performance assessment, but it is not going to fulfill a requirement for the PK3 credential. That will be separate, and that TPA is not developed yet. Sorry, Lori, just thought I'd answer those.
That's okay. Any other questions? All right, I'm gonna. Therefore, the teacher level permit remains transcript based.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Mary, who's going to just talk through, reiterate. I know we've this information is included on the survey or the field test sign up form, but just to make sure everybody understands the requirements, I'm going to pass it over to Mary.
All right, thank you, Lori. As you can tell, in order for this to be successful, we really need you. We really need your candidates to help us to better inform the CalFTPA before it's finalized. So we wanted to just kind of walk through some highlights and think through candidate placements. So really thinking about when candidates are in placements and what kind of placements candidates are in. So in order to participate, we are asking that candidates be placed in settings where they are engaged in synchronous activities with children ages 3 to 5. So those in-person settings. We anticipate that each of the cycles will take about 2 to 4 weeks to complete. So at a minimum, your candidate should be in placements for at least 2 weeks per cycle. And the field test runs, as we've said, for about 8 weeks. They need to be in placements. They can be in a state preschool placement, Title V or Title 22 license setting, Head Start, or transitional kindergarten. But they cannot be in a family child care setting or before and after school settings. Those are not eligible for the field tests. Again, programs that are interested in participating should complete the field test recruitment survey. I'm not sure if we will put that.
I will put that in the chat.
Okay. Next slide. So in order, and this has been said, in order to participate, we will need a field test contact person from each program. And we will communicate with that person, and we will ask that person to also communicate to your programs, to other faculty within your programs, share out any updates and any other type of communication that needs to be shared. If your program is participating in the field tests, we welcome all candidates to participate. Lori, in a few minutes, will give some highlights of the scoring, but we will score a target number of candidate submissions. Candidates will not receive individual scores, but programs will receive aggregated score results from the field test. And this has also been talked about, focus groups and surveys. So we are also asking, if you participate in the field test, that you also participate in surveys and focus groups. So we'll send out surveys to all participants, contact people for the programs, faculty, candidates, the scores, and invite you all to also participate in a focus group. So surveys really help us to learn more about placements and understanding of the assessments. We want to know the clarity, we want to know the ease of the directions and the templates and the rubrics from each of the cycles. And then we'll also hold focus groups, and we did this also for the pilots. We'll invite the contact people from each of the programs, again, faculty, any of the all candidates, And for the pilot, we just held the focus groups on Zoom. They were about an hour and 15 minutes, and we just asked questions, and we're looking to learning more about feedback from the assessments, more about experiences, any challenges, any affirmations that were involved with the field test, just so we can learn and better inform us and make those changes before the CalFTPA is finalized. And the next slide, Lori. And again, Lori pointed this out during the field test timeline, that programs should submit a list of all their candidates who will participate in the field test by January 20th. And then once submitted, we will send out vouchers to your candidates so that they can use them during the registration process. And again, if you can't get them in by the 20th and a few days later, please feel free to send them in. We want you to participate. You may not get the vouchers back on February 7th, but you will get them back. And I think Lori has already discussed the voucher process, and we can talk about that more in some upcoming webinars.
All right, you've heard us talk about scoring these assessments. So we are also encouraging programs participating in the field test, or even if your program is not participating in the field test for whatever reason, perhaps your candidates are not in placements during the active time of the field test, or it's just not something that would work for you. An alternative to get exposure to these assessments would be to consider signing up as an assessor yourselves, or any of your faculty or staff from your programs that might be interested. We will be recruiting a number of assessors to help us score all of the field test assessments. Again, the submission deadline is April 7th. It will be a consensus scoring process, which means we will put together teams of assessors. We'll put you through a training so that you know what you're doing and what you're looking for. And then together in groups of 2 or 3 or 3 or 5, 3 to 5, you will convene online to review and score field test submissions.
Can I add one thing? Can I add one thing, Lori?
Go ahead.
There's also bias training. So anyone participating as a field test assessor will also participate in bias training before doing any scoring.
Absolutely. And so all of that training, bias training and assessor training will be combined together in a 2 or 3 day online session. Typically, if you become an assessor, you would only score 1 of the 3 cycles. We wouldn't ask you to score more than that. You are compensated for your time for assessing, and there is an application if you are interested. I will put that URL in the chat as well. But again, this is aside from integrating the cycles into your classes as a faculty person, this is probably the next best way to get really familiar with the cycles and assessments and how they're scored.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually a fabulous professional development opportunity. There are to be qualified to be an assessor, you must be current or retired within 3 years. You must be a current or retired within 3 years California early childhood educational professional with at least 3 years of experience in 1 or more of the following ways. Either you are an early childhood education faculty, that includes both instructors and field supervisors at an institution of higher ed or other approved program. Or you can be a PK, TK, or K teacher holding a teacher permit or higher, or permit or a multiple subject credential. Or the third option is to be a PKTK administrator holding an early childhood education program director permit, or the administrator services credential with experience in TKK or first grade.
Mhm.
Any questions about assessors? Will there be stipends? Yes, there will be stipends for helping out with scoring, assessing.
And just to be clear, there are not stipends available for participating in the field test itself. But for, as Lori said, for assessing, yes.
This is Lisa Fuller.
Mhm.
So you say that we're going to be assessing locally. Are we going to need this type of training in order to be a local assessor for our own schools?
That is an excellent question, Lisa. I'm glad you said that. Thank you. I am the CTC is developing in conjunction with ECE Pearson, a training of trainers model. So right around, by the time these submissions are scored for the field test, we will look at what, you know, needs to be edited and everything. And we'll develop that model, and we will do 10 trainings throughout California. Some will be in person, some will be virtual. And we will try to gear that to the needs of each program that would like to participate in those trainings. And myself, I'm sure Amy, Zoltan, the ECE Pearson team, we will be there to help train folks at their institutions, and they will be then able to train their colleagues who might want to come on board with that later. So that's what the training will be. So if you wanted to assess for this field test, and you know there's a limited number of folks that can be selected for that, and you aren't able to do that, you will receive training to locally score as well. Good question. I think I see something in the chat. When and how will assessors be notified after applying? Lori, do you, can you address?
I would imagine that we will be reaching out to applicants in early spring next year as we start gearing up, ramping up for the assessor process. Certainly, I believe that folks who came on board and helped us assess with the pilot can expect to hear first, and then new applications shortly thereafter.
Mm-hmm. I didn't see anything else in the chat.
Okay.
Okay. Ongoing supports for field test programs. I'm sorry, one more question. Can more than one person apply to be an assessor? I'm thinking maybe, Maribel, you're talking about at your institution? Oh, from one, okay, thank you. Yes, more than one can apply. All who are interested may apply. So yes, anyone who fits those criteria, sorry, let me clarify. Anyone who fits that criteria who is interested in assessing is welcome to apply. So some supports for field test programs. Weekly CTC hosted office hours. Now for the pilot, I did have office hours that I hosted, and those were on Friday mornings. I don't think the Friday morning time worked for some of the folks in the field. So I will need to send, get some information from you all, maybe send out a quick little survey of what might work for office hours, and do my best to accommodate what works for most. But I will begin office hours again in mid-January 2023. Can't believe we're almost at the end of the year. And then ongoing support via email. I really want someone to email me, please. Most of you have my personal email at work at CTC, but there's also the ECE CalTPA at ctc.ca.gov email. Please send me something in that mailbox that's just empty. The PSD e-news, if you have not already subscribed, that is a source for information. And Lori has put it in the chat. Thank you so much, Lori. And again, here are some informational webinars. November 30th is today. We're here now. December 7th, if you missed my message in the chat, I went back in and fixed that so that you can start to register as of 3:30, which is in 9 minutes today. And you can register all the way up to the end of that webinar on December 7th. The kickoff is noted for February 2nd. I am happy to add another one in January. And then there will be a midpoint webinar for programs that participate in the field test. It's kind of like a, hey, how are you doing? Checking in type of webinar. The CTC YouTube channel has archived resources. And this particular recording, I want to remind you again, this will be a private YouTube link for today. And once the field test begins, ES Pearson will have a comprehensive field test website that will have resources and information to help guide you through the field test. So those are some of the ongoing supports that we have currently. And we did talk about having maybe a little resource for consent forms and things of that nature. And so Jeannie has volunteered to share some things, and maybe some other people will share some things. So that could be another support. And on the next slide, please feel free to type in the chat. If you have other ideas for supports that the CTC can offer for this, please type it in the chat so we can take note of that, and we will offer all that we can. We want you to be successful with this, and we want your candidates to be successful with this. So
I think a support that would be absolutely beautiful is some Canvas modules that have this already put together for our professors or faculty to use, so that we are consistent across the board, across the state.
That is an excellent suggestion. And June Milovich had suggested that as well. That is a possibility that is still in the works and being discussed, and we're working the details out. So I can't, I don't have a final date for that yet. But yes, I agree. It's a good suggestion. Anything else too, please put it in the chat, because we do go back and look at these and want to know what you need. And you may not know exactly what other support you might want yet. So if something pops up later, you could use that wonderful email that has been sitting empty that I would love to have something to respond to. So I don't see anything else in the chat. I don't see any hands raised. Are there any other questions? Valerie notes that it would be nice to have examples of the schedule that faculty have used with the cycles, especially if they've done all 3 in one semester. That would be an excellent suggestion. And if anyone has anything like that did participate in the pilot and you are willing to share, please also email that to me. You can use my CTC email with my name in it if you prefer that one, or you may use the ECE CalTPA email.
Cassandra, that would be a great question to ask the practicum instructors on next Wednesday's webinar.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we will do that.
And what do you mean by the schedule? Because it says right in the directions that they should have like at least 2 weeks. I gave my students 3 weeks because I did an introductory week. Then I did the 2 weeks with them having the tool. And then they had to turn it in once after that 2 weeks. So I guess I'm confused at that question.
Maribel, do you want to add, share a little more? I can't see you.
Or you mean Valerie?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Valerie. Excuse me. Sorry.
Hi, Jeannie. I know Jeannie actually. So hi. I just mean like how we would plan, because this isn't the only thing that we would do in practicum. So I would just love to see, like, are there other assignments that practicum instructors have done to lead up to them? Is this really like the focus of their course? Like just looking at all the different components that we're looking at, like a semester long schedule. If you've done all 3, given the timelines being a little tighter than we have in a semester, like, are they overlapping? Are they, just looking at more the logistics of it, because I wouldn't be actually teaching it. I would be supporting it and supporting the faculty member in implementing it. So yeah, just looking more logistically.
You might have, Valerie, I'm just going to throw in, let's say you had 10 students. You may have some that do each cycle. You may have some that can do more than one, but it's 2 to 4 weeks. So it may not take someone a whole month, 4 weeks to do that. So
True.
Yeah,
Good
if you
point.
have some that can, if one candidate, maybe they're more suited to do one cycle. Maybe you have other candidates that are well suited to do 2 or 3, depending on their placement, right? So you can do different things with the candidates you have that are going to be participating. I don't want that to I don't want you to feel like that limits your participation.
Great, thank you.
You're
That
welcome.
does make it difficult, though, to include it as assignments and have it be part of the curriculum of the course if we're having it individually done.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you remove a lot. You remove a lot of the stuff that you've done previously, and this takes the place. And then, for example, we used to have a ton of lesson plans due, and that just has been, I kept 5 strong lesson plans, then the 3 cycles and their day in charge. That's how they show their competency. So when they leave my program, I feel fully confident that they can run a classroom.
Thank you for that, Jeannie. And Jeannie was in the pilot, and you can be a huge help, Jeannie. We need your expertise. Good questions, though. Okay. So we can work on trying to compile some information like that too. And maybe have some of our folks who participated in the pilot who are coming back, maybe they can share a little bit about what they did and what worked. Okay. Next slide, please. I want to thank you for, I know we're a little early. I'm surprised. I am surprised, but I can probably give you a half hour back in your day. I just want to remind you again, the December 7th Eventbrite is open as of 3:30. You've got 2 minutes and you can start registering. I know you were going to make a beeline over there. Please sign up. Don't you laugh at me, Jeannie. Please sign up. We want to see you there. It is designed for practicum instructors. Some of the slide deck, to be honest, will look very similar, but all are welcome. It doesn't hurt to hear something more than once, and there will probably be a few slides that are a little bit different. Thank you for joining us and for your interest in this important work. We really do need you, and we need your colleagues to make this work best for your candidates and for the young learners that we all serve. So thank you again for being here. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you again. Please email me, so my mailbox isn't empty. So please email me. I'm happy to answer any questions and be of help. Thank you again. Oh, and June put a message. If you're not the practicum instructor at your institution, please forward it to someone. If you're not able to attend, please just share it. That's fine. All are welcome. Thank you again.
Thank you. And I'm sending you an email right now, Cassandra.
Yay, my mailbox won't be empty. Thank you.
See you next week.
See you next week.